We've heard so many amazing creative ideas today, but we've truly saved some of the best for last and some of the most, frankly, our basic needs for food, fashion, and agriculture. Climate change, as we heard, is threatening agriculture everywhere, and that means the food we eat and the clothes we wear are at risk. The new tariffs and the Trump administration policies are not helping, of course. Hello, don't get me started. But how do we adapt? How do we ensure that we're still able to feed and clothe ourselves and our neighbors as the climate shifts? So I'd like you to meet three truly extraordinary women. I know I've said that all day, but brace yourself on this one. Alison Ward is CEO of CottonConnect, a nonprofit organization of female farmers who are growing cotton with regenerative agriculture techniques, especially in Southeast Asia and China, and she will tell us more about that. You can also listen to my episode with her on Electric Ladies podcast. It'll drop tomorrow morning. Alison has 25 years of international experience in sustainability and corporate affairs. Zara Summers is Chief Science Officer of LanzaTech, where she and her team are, brace yourself, converting captured CO2 into fiber for clothing, protein for food, and sustainable aviation fuel. Yes, you heard me correctly. This is not science fiction. She even brought samples, so buckle up. Their fiber is being used by some of the top brands today that we'll hear about today. And I also had her on my show, gee, what a shock, on Electric Ladies podcast, and you can listen to that. It's already there. Robin Currey has also been on my show a while ago. She's Associate Provost and Dean for Academic Affairs at Luther College and head of their Sustainable Food Systems program. She's been doing this work for many years and, as I said, was on my show. Her research focuses on biodiversity conservation for sustainable diets and climate resiliency, especially for small-scale farmers. And by the way, small-scale farmers actually dominate the marketplace. So rock and roll, here we go. Robin, how stable is our food supply?
It depends where you are on the planet, I would say. So, we know that globally we have enough production on planet Earth in order to ensure proper nutrition. And again, nutrition is very different from caloric and a full belly, as we know from all of the health issues that are more in developed worlds, but there's serious distribution problems. So I'm a scholar of food systems, so the systems scientist she called herself a nerd, so I'm like, there were two nerds at that table.
Nerds on one level or another, yeah.
But food systems have to do with everything from production to processing, distribution, the utilization. So that's like how we prepare it, how we're cooking it, is it fermented or not? And then, of course, end of life for food systems, which includes food waste, and we hope not that much, but in the United States, we're still around 40% of the food that we go to all this trouble of producing with all the concerns around the production just going to waste. So that piece means, with the distribution challenges, that not everybody has equitable access to the kinds of foods that they need and want at the times that they need them. So there's quite a bit of instability, and I want to mention one driver of that instability that a lot of definitions of food systems and food system sustainability omit, and I intentionally omitted it in mine, but that has to do with the origins of the plants that we're growing, whether that be for fiber or whether that be for food. And so by the origins, we mean the seeds. And we mean who were the people who cultivated and put that human intention onto what are the wild crop relatives of our food. And so right now, globally, there are 4 major transnational organizations that are dominating the seed sector. So we can talk about food systems, fiber systems, and then also seed systems. And there's a lot of indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge that has gone into the selection of those varieties around, and a lot of climate adaptation. What grows well here? And because of that here-ness and the fact that seeds, most of them, you have to act with intention on them year by year, although some survive in the seed bank for longer, which Zara will know. But they can be very easily lost. And we actually know that the most reliable data, so I'm going to share with you the most reliable data because I'm a scientist. And so we know for certain that in the United States from 1990 to 1980, so in those 80 years, that the United States lost 93% of its seed varieties. So just one example.
93%? Wow.
Yes. Just for example, lettuce, we lost over 500 varieties. Yeah, so it's a thing, and it should be a concern. And it's something that I'm highly concerned about, which is what brought me to Central Asia, Kyrgyzstan, which is where I spent a good 15 years of my life working on equitable food systems and trying to get marginalized farmers, primarily women, integrated into the markets, because if you can create a market for it, then you can conserve the agrobiodiversity. So those are the varieties. And we did a lot of work with climate finance also. We called it credit for conservation. So we were able to finance loans for small women farmers who, at lower interest rates, when we coupled that with agricultural extension, but my kind, the regenerative kind. So we built an ag extension group within the bank, essentially, and then we're able to discount based on conservation behaviors. And so those are some steps that exist globally that folks are trying to take to stabilize that loss of agrobiodiversity, because that's the root of our adaptation for the plants, because as climate changes, some places are going to be warmer, some places are not, some places are going to be wetter, some places are not. And if we don't maintain that basic germplasm as the basis upon which we can part human intention for the selection, then we have a food supply crisis.
Wow. Okay, digest that. I think that says our food supply is in danger, would be my takeaway from that. Alison, you're also working with small-scale farmers. When it was interesting, I spoke at the UN Climate Week in September, and I found out that women make up 80% or more of the garment industry workers, and that nearly 97% of them are in the world where you work, Southeast Asia and China. Most of them earning meager wages as low as 33 cents an hour. Cents an hour. And of course, they're being underpaid and overworked. And it's not just a problem in Southeast Asia, it's a problem in Europe as well. There are reports of, as I said, it happening in Europe. But fashion, I don't know if you know this, fashion is rated by the UN as the second most carbon intensive industry, emitting the second most carbon emissions of every industry. Think about it. The clothes we wear, all of speaking of systems, the ecosystem of making this stuff is highly, highly polluting. And fashion, garments make up 7% of landfills and put 8 to 10% of global CO2 and 500,000 tons of microplastics into the oceans per year. So imagine how many years that's been going on. Alison, you did this great report on women and climate change recently, highlighting the disproportionate effects of climate shifts on women in agricultural economies. So talk about what you found and talk about the work that you're doing with CottonConnect, because I think it's truly amazing.
Yes, thank you. And lots of synergies with what you've been talking about. I think perhaps I'll take you back 11 years when I started this role at CottonConnect, and I went to my first cotton farm in Gujarat in India. And I went to a village meeting, and I looked around, and there were no women in this meeting. And I was like, well, where are the women? Where are the women? Where are the? And then behind me, in rushed Hindi, Gujarati, I could hear the team, where are the women? Where are the women? Where are the women? Fast forward 11 years, we've got over 270,000 women in our programs. And when I joined, women weren't considered an important stakeholder to train because, they just were overlooked.
Did you hear that? 200,000. Yeah.
270,000.
Sorry. 270,000.
But so I think it's about the status of women. And then if we look at climate change, and I have to have my book because I have to look this up in Fahrenheit for you. In India, we're seeing heat of 117 degrees Fahrenheit regularly in India. And if you imagine you're getting up to work in that, so the women are getting up earlier.
Outside.
They're getting up really early. They may be finding their water sources further away. They may be finding their cattle aren't drinking as much, so they're not producing as much milk. And we did some focus groups with some women in Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. And what was interesting is their health concerns and their concerns for their family for the future. And I think that's what really came out very strongly. It wasn't just about the hard work they were doing, but they were really worried about their communities. We also have a group of climate change ambassadors, which I can talk a bit more about later. So this is about giving women knowledge and skills about climate change. Before we talked to these women, they actually thought that climate change was a divine intervention, and they didn't understand it. They had no idea that the changes that they were seeing were due to weather patterns. They thought it was something that was more divine. And I think that sort of knowledge and this sort of lack of knowledge that a lot of these smallholder farmers have is really quite surprising. And these women are quite near big urban centres, but just haven't had access to training and knowledge. And that's really where we've been intervening.
Wow. Yeah. Just let me stay with you for a second because you brought it up. Talk a little bit about that training because I think it's really critical. We've talked today about how important education is in general across a range of topics. But these are women who are essentially learning to farm differently, and they're also on minuscule budgets, et cetera. But you're teaching them regenerative agriculture. You're teaching them sustainable farming, and to then breed, grow, or whatever the word is. Obviously, I'm a city girl. Hello. The cotton that then is considered sustainable and organic, or however. So how are you finding these women? How are you training them?
Yeah. So if we think about regenerative, what's quite interesting, it goes back to your indigenous point. There is a concept of zero agricultural input in zero farming in India. So we're almost going back to some original techniques that we're rediscovering, which is quite interesting. And then for our climate change ambassadors, we're showing them how to, rather than buy a pesticide, we're showing them how to use what's on their farm and make their own natural pesticides. So in India, the neem tree grows. You can take the leaf and crush it, and it becomes a natural pesticide. And King Charles uses this on his sheep to de-lice them. So there you go, a little unknown fact. He uses neem oil on his sheep. So by doing that, we've really seen a difference with our climate change ambassadors. So before we were training them, only 4% were really using any of these natural pesticides and fertilizers, and now something like 90% are using. So a real shift. What's interesting, and there's an amazing lady called Kumida Ben who's in Gujarat in northwest India, and I went to her farm, and she's a climate change ambassador, and her role is to learn and then train other women. so she's learned about all these new techniques. She's learned about composting. She's got vermicomposting. But what was interesting, she says now, I am really proud to be a climate change ambassador. You could see her shoulders go up, and she stood taller and prouder because we had given her that status in the village. And she also says, before we weren't consulted, but now my husband and I farm together and we work together. So there's the positive impact from regenerative, but also there's that sort of positive impact in terms of the status of women in these communities. But I'll just give you a fact on regenerative. So there's a great company called AgriSound, and they basically measure the frequencies of bees. So we've had some bee frequency measurement boxes up in farms in Gujarat in India. And we've compared a regenerative farm to a conventional farm, and we found a 62% increase in bee activity going into regenerative farms.
And we have a pollinator crisis in this.
Yeah, so we can see that, really easy. And of course, the farmers were fascinated, this idea that this box goes up and we get this measurement. And
I think we could use one of those machines in this room. They'd be measuring all the frequency in this room, right? Zara, thank you, Alison. That's truly amazing. How the heck do you take captured CO2 and turn it into clothing and food and sustainable aviation fuel? 3 completely different things. I know the miracle of chemistry, but come on, woman. Explain in English how this works. I know you're a piled high and deep, but try to educate us.
All right. I want you to imagine a roll of toilet paper. And I want you to think about the first
Bet you didn't
sheet,
expect it to start that
right?
way.
I don't have notes, so we're going.
I'm kidding. Go ahead.
So you're going to look at that first sheet, and you're going to be everything from everything that the 2 of these beautiful women have talked about with cultivation of seeds and the T-Rex and everything else. It's going to happen on that first sheet because this roll of toilet paper is the timeline of the Earth. And you're going to unroll, and you're going to unroll, and you're going to unroll. And right about the time that you start to get worried of, I need to bring up more toilet paper from the basement if you live in the Midwest or from wherever you keep it, where you don't have basements. That's about the time when microbial life figured out how to eat CO2. Okay? And so when we go back to 3.6 billion years ago, when microbial life first started, the only carbon, because there was still carbon on the Earth, the only carbon there was in a reduced form. It was either carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, or methane. That's it. That's all there was. There was no oxygen in the atmosphere because algae hadn't figured out how to slam photons into photosystems and fix carbon. These microbial lives use a funny pathway called the Wood-Lungdahl pathway, and it takes CO2 and hydrogen or carbon monoxide and builds everything that cell needs from that. These cells are fermenting organisms, mean in order to complete, you and I, we eat carbon and we breathe out CO2, right? Because we drop electrons onto oxygen. You breathe oxygen. You eat glucose, you breathe oxygen.
You're diving into the fascinating world of
I know you are. This is the fascinating world of microbial life. I'm a microbial supremacist, by the way, so if you can't tell. And so imagine that these microbes are able to slam these carbons together and make everything they need. They make lipids that are 20, 30 carbons long. That is a wonderful thing. But in order to live, they don't breathe oxygen like you or I because it didn't exist. There wasn't free oxygen in the atmosphere. There was just water. They spit something out in order to complete something goes in, something comes out. That's all you need to know about life. They spit out ethanol. Good for us, right? This is similar pathways to yeast, but better because they don't also spit out CO2 like yeast do. A third of the carbon that yeast eat comes out as carbon dioxide. So unfortunately, there's a fun fact. But these microbes are called acetogens, your oldest ancestor, if you will. They spit out ethanol, so we've harnessed that. We've basically left them untouched. They are descendants of early life. They do this to live. They take CO2 and they turn it into ethanol. And so all we have to do is a little bit of chemistry on the back end and take that ethanol, and we either pull off an OH, dehydrate it, if you will, and turn it into ethylene, which then you slam together and make long polymers. And those long polymers become your jet fuel. This is your sustainable aviation fuel, or as the new administration would like us to call it, synthetic aviation fuel, whatever. It's still SAF, so fine. But they also, you can use that. Once you have ethylene, it's actually a building block of everything that petroleum is used for today. And so we've made SAF. We've partnered with amazing brands, and we've made, so pretty much any synthetic fiber that you can get from fossil, we have a path to create. Don't ask me how long it took to put a supply chain together to do this. So we've partnered, so these are just two things I carry around with me because they pack up really small. A running shirt from On. This running shirt, so you say, well, so where do you get your CO2? So this running shirt started off as a carbon emission from a steel mill in China. And so we're able to, instead of pumping that carbon monoxide and dioxide directly into the atmosphere, we pump it into our massive, kind of like a brewery, but cooler. Huge, huge 500,000 liter tanks of living, breathing, spitting out ethanol microbes. And so we harness that. It's a continuous process. So it's very much like a refining process, but we're refining. It's beautiful. And what's fun is that On was so proud to do this that you'll notice the design on this shirt. They tried to make it look like an emission, right? So it's like it's smoke going into the air. And this is what we would call a capsule collection in fashion, right? So you do very bespoke pieces that are part of a collection. So this is called the On Cloud collection. You can Google it now and buy stuff made from our ethanol on On's website. We've partnered with REI. We have a lot of REI brand running apparel. We made a perfume with Gucci. You can still buy it. It's called Where My Heart Beats. 100% of that ethanol in that bottle, which is the majority of the fragrance carrier, is from a steel mill in China. So you buy it. You have that money. But what's even more exciting are these leggings. So this is with Athleta. So we've done Lululemon. We've done a lot of brands like this. But what's exciting about Athleta is this is no longer a capsule collection. They have committed that they want to hit about 25% of the polyester of the carbon that is going into these leggings is going to be from emission-produced ethanol. And why this is a massive step change is while this is cute, and this gets people thinking about where does carbon come from? This is now part of your everyday. Right? This is every time you go buy a pair of leggings, 25%, hopefully growing, is going to be from carbon emissions. And so what you see here is a massive step change transition for us. You mentioned a couple other things we make. So we make sustainable aviation fuel. I'd say about 90% of the ethanol we make with our bacteria goes into fuel. These are important because this gets your everyday person to touch it and say, where does carbon come from? Where does my other carbon come from? I think the documentary is amazing.
Yeah. Well, the other piece to this is polyester is made from petroleum. So this replaces polyester made from petroleum. One of the big arguments that the fossil fuel companies are making right now is, well, we can't get rid of petroleum because we need it for polyester for clothing. Da-da-da-da.
Yep.
And the answer is LanzaTech, right?
And because it's microbial,
don't tell me it isn't possible.
But so I know this isn't necessarily this is a little bit of science fiction, but we can reprogram bacteria. They're easy. They don't care. They'll take genes from a plant, and so I have a lot of molecules that are really hard to make outside of. So the scent of a rose, you can all close your eyes and imagine what a rose smells like. It's just 2-phenylethyl alcohol, 2-PE.
I have one over there, by the way, if you want to test it.
So if you smell that scent, that is a biochemical pathway that we've put in our bacteria, so we actually have reactors that smell like roses because of the unsustainable practice to harvest those types of fragrances. And so what we're focusing on are not just capturing emissions, but is there such a high demand for chemicals, and the way we produce it today could be damaging to the environment. So we're looking also at protein. So microbial protein These cells, because all they do is take gas and smash it together, are incredibly protein-dense organisms, and they have all 21 amino acids, including beautiful profiles of all of the essential amino acids. It mimics your whey powder. We can grow that on pure CO2 and hydrogen. We don't have to grow it on emissions that could have other toxic things in it. We grow it on the back end of a brewery because yeast makes a lot of CO2. So we just combine that with green hydrogen and make protein that we're selling into pet food and into aquaculture. So
Wow,
lots
sounds
of
like
stuff.
Robin could use it in the sustainable food systems too, right? I mean, this
there's
is
different paradigms.
this is
there.
kind of insane stuff, right? I mean, we were just brainstorming solutions, and then you like, if somebody said to you, you know, we're going to make fiber out of captured CO2, you look at them like they swallowed LSD, right? Well, guess what? They are. Not swallowing LSD, that is. Well, that's another topic. But anyway, Robin, she kind of touched on something, though, in that great explanation, and that is the soil. So we have a soil problem on this earth because it's so been depleted by the use of pesticides as well as climate change and impacts. So you can't talk about the food systems without talking about the soil. And arable land. In fact, I did a story on some folks called Solar REIT, R-E-I-T, their real estate investment trust, where they're taking, leasing unarable land from farmers and putting solar panels on it so that the family doesn't have to lose their land and they can get income from that for solar panels. But the land should still be arable. This isn't right that it's not arable anymore. So talk about the soil challenge, because I think people don't always really pay attention to that enough.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're talking about the same organisms. So you're talking about microorganisms, and so what we've come to understand is that not only do microorganisms control our emotions based on our gut flora, but our immune system also, but they also are controlling the growth of plants, their insect resistance, so their pest tolerance and resistance. We know now that plants communicate with each other, and some of those communication molecules are dependent upon some of the mineral and nutrient contents in the soil. So all these things are together. So the paradigm around soil is no longer about amendments and then you're cultivating your plants on top of that. The paradigm around soil is that you're cultivating microorganisms and soil quality through having good organic matter in there, through having a good structure in the soil, so not necessarily churning it up, otherwise known as tilling, on a regular basis, because all those microorganisms kind of lose their homes. Think of it as a multi-story apartment building, and some do better on the bottom and some do better on the top, and you just put them through an earthquake, essentially, when one's done that. And so the soil quality is a serious issue, and we know the research is absolutely crystal clear that the nutrient content of our food, aka plants, for the most part, that are growing in depleted soils also have micronutrient depletions also. So our a tomato is not a tomato is not a tomato. So what was grown in soil in my parents' generation or my grandparents' generation, when we had all those seed varieties, remember those that do not exist anymore? That actually, because the soil degradation was better, the nutrient content in the foods was greater. And this has follow-on effects also for livestock feeding. And actually what one feeds one's animals then impacts the nutrient quality of the meat that you're eating. And my turn to blow your minds. So for example, if your cattle are grass-fed and that they're consuming a lot of choline-rich foods and also a bunch of sage, then the meat actually based on the way that your body processes it, actually contributes less cholesterol than our corn-fed. So it's not necessarily the meat that is causing, the more high-income countries to have health crises. It's what the animals are fed, which then results in a different nutrient quality of the proteins that we're eating. And same thing with the fruit and veg.
Wow. That's pretty insane. Alison, one of the things that you guys are doing that also kind of blows my mind is you have a tracking system. So get this. So she'll explain this, but the way I understand it is you can tell when I'm wearing a sweater or in her shirt, the cotton came from one of your farms and how it was grown.
Yeah, yes. Absolutely.
Don't tell me it's not possible. Go ahead, explain.
So I guess it goes back to the start of my journey 11 years ago, and I do like a challenge. And I think we've talked about, earlier in the session about this, you're a drop in the ocean, or how do you make change? And I was really quite determined that brands, so we work with people like Primark, Carrefour, who are a big French retailer across Europe and Asia. Really, how do we hold them account in their supply chains? And they need to know the people in their supply chains and know where their cotton is coming from. So we've started with the farmer and started tracking the cotton from that farmer up in the supply chain. Everyone else goes garment down. We're doing the hard work. We've now got a QR code. So when the farmer sells their cotton, that QR code scans that and it goes up into our tracking system, TraceBell. So today, I'll just look at my stats again. We've traced the equivalent of 1.7 billion T-shirts have been traced through our system. But now there's some really clever tech through a couple of companies. There's one which is an isotope test. So you can test the soil and so you can test the soil in the village, and then that isotope then tells you that that cotton is from that soil in that village. And there's also a DNA marker that you can spray on the cotton, and then you can take that right up to garment, and it goes through all of the washers and all of the different processing. And you can tell that that is the unique DNA marker that was sprayed at a particular point in the supply chain. So technology is really leaping forward. But I think for me, there's something about the everyday that you talked about. And when I started this sector, a lot of sustainable fashion was quite high-end and quite expensive. And I really set out to change the high street. And I think and you do have Primark coming here, it is a value retailer. If you go in and look at their cotton T-shirts or their jeans, we could tell you which farmer that cotton in that T-shirt came from now. So for me, that's a real shift, and a real shift in that retailer. It's high street prices, but they have actually embraced sustainability, to some extent in their stores, and that's really important. That it's not an exclusive, beautiful capsule collection. It's every day, and that's, I think, so important in this agenda.
It's not a $4,000 Gabrielle Hearst dress, right? Yeah. So I want to capture your questions. We'll have time for a question or two, but I want to come closing on a positive note, but a what can we do note. So you mentioned Primark, Zara, I know you mentioned Lululemon. So talk about the brands that you're working with a little more, but what we can do and how we can help get more brands on board with these systems and these products, because obviously the consumer market's going to drive this, right? If there's more people buying leggings or whatever made from captured CO2 made polyester. If somebody gave me that sentence like 6 months ago, anyway. But how can we encourage with our buying power, either as companies or as individuals? I mean, we're women, right? We're 85% of the consuming purchases, and we drive markets. They want us. We are the demographic that they want. So what can we do with our dollars to spend our money more aligned with these values? And which companies do we need to pressure the heck out of?
You want me to start?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. There's lots of brands. If you're in Europe, there's even more. We usually market our products under the recycled CO2. That's what we call it. Some companies will call it CO2 Renew or other things like that. And so we worked with Craig Hoppers. I don't know if anyone. It's like the North Face, but for the UK. And they make a lot of fleece jackets, really nice fleece jackets. Not too expensive, same price as their regular, but they have a CO2 Renew brand. And so we did a couple jackets with them. They sold out. A couple more jackets because it says on the outside, this garment was made with recycled CO2. This started its life as emissions. People were so into it. Now we have like every possible type of jacket you can buy from Craig Hoppers. We have stuff in. So we have, parkas and fleece and every color. And I think they did a test with us, saw a good response, and then said, give us all you got. And so I think it's exactly that. It's ask yourself, what am I buying today? Is there an alternative where this carbon has a second life? There are some places. So I've worked a lot with Lululemon, and I love that they know all the women. It's usually women that make their clothes. We've also worked with Nike in Vietnam, where we go and we meet because when we partner with brands, we want to know that they're good, do good, be good. Right? Say good, do good, be good.
So you follow through the supply chain.
We follow through the whole supply chain.
Wow. Because
it's not just about profit. I mean, we want to be profitable so we stay around as a business, but it's not just about profit because it is the what can one person do and how can you disrupt a market. What I didn't mention was I spent 10 years leading ExxonMobil's biosciences division.
Oh yeah, I forgot that part.
Before I started at LanzaTech. And so I know what it's like to make tons and tons of hand over fist money and do nothing good. I mean, I'm sure they do something good. I still use their gas every once in a while when I have to. But there's something to be said for just being a little more conscientious. Like, get a dopamine hit by watching otter videos and don't get a dopamine hit by buying something. Like if I could say one thing, and then if you do buy something, ask where the carbon in that something came from, because there is no such thing as decarbonization. Everything's carbon. There's a documentary about it. It's like defossilization or like second use. I want my carbon to be used as much as possible.
So it doesn't go in the air.
Yeah, because if you keep using it down here, it's not up there.
Alison, talk about the brands and what we can do to get cotton made by these amazing women in your farms.
Yeah, so I think it is reading the label and thinking about, and it doesn't matter whether it's food or fibre, thinking about there is a person behind that label, and what do we know about them? I remember years ago I worked with a company and their chocolate spec said vanilla from Amsterdam. I mean, there is no vanilla grown in Amsterdam. So, really encouraging brands, food brands, fashion brands to really know their supply chain and for us to be more conscious.
Okay, who has a question for these incredibly brilliant women? Come on, people. Okay, go ahead, Chelsea.
You said that the athletic pants are 25% your product.
Take the mic, Chelsea,
Oh, sorry.
please.
Hi. So, Zara, you said that your athletic pants are 25% made of this reused carbon. Is it 25% of each pair of leggings, or is it 25% of their manufacturing line?
It's typically 25% of each pair.
Oh, great. So it's not like I have to go and look for the section of the store that has the...
No, if you go, so REI on Athleta, Craig Hoppers, if you go to their search bar and just put in LanzaTech, it'll just all of a sudden give you a bunch of things, and they've programmed their search to populate everything.
That's her company, the company she works for.
great.
Yeah.
The lady in the green jacket also had her hand up.
So I noticed that you were talking about your giant ferment machine, right, that captures the carbon. Am I understanding that correctly? I noticed it was abroad, right? But in Texas, we obviously have a lot of those streams that are on the front of that shirt. Is there any push to develop that here as well?
Yeah, so we have a grant for $200 million with the Department of Energy for Project Secure.
Write your Congress people and tell them to
Write your
keep that
Congress
grant
people,
in place.
especially
grants
in
flowing.
Texas. That so Project Secure is meant to capture CO2 on an ethylene cracker and make more ethylene from that CO2. So it's like double use. So we are trying to integrate with fossil, which is I think why we haven't been canceled yet, because one of the major things that the Department of Energy is still focusing on is if you're going to do green, integrate it with fossil. And so we've already done that. And so Project Secure is moving forward. We have contracted already. So that would be the first domestic commercial scale plant in Texas. So
Very cool.
The lady next to Shelley, yeah, so we can easily pass the mic. I like this. Go ahead.
Thank you. Zara, so you mentioned tackling a supply chain and how difficult it is to unwind current supply chains. I work in construction and kind of materials for the built environment, and so I'd love to learn a little bit more about how you tackled that to try to replicate some of that in the construction space.
you just got to find one person that's willing to do it. And then everybody else, after a while, it's always like, you know.
You mean one part of your supply
One-
chain?
Yeah, so we found India. So India Glycols was the first person willing to take our ethanol to monoethylene glycol. And then we found a supplier in Taiwan who was so interested in low carbon polyester that they agreed to do tests with our fibers and say, yes, it's going to hold up as well. And so we actually had to go all over the world to get our supply chain built. And now that there's more demand, we're doing local in Europe, local in, so, but yeah.
This is what Jennifer calls a movement of one. All it takes is one. You start with one, and then somebody breaks the ice, and then other people move forward.
And a lot of it was cold call.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there you go. The lady right there, you can pass the mic. I love this, passing the mic. Go ahead.
Right. Thank you so much. So I also have a supply chain question for Alison. Sorry, I'm trying to read. So you talked about how your supply chain is very transparent. Is that the blockchain kind of digitalized format? So that's one question. And then a second question is, I understand that it probably has a lot of costs. So a lot of companies might not want to do that and be able to track everything. So how can we talk about that?
So it wasn't transparent, and that's the work we had to do. And then it's finding somebody who will move first. So I remember the first time I was sat in front of the Bangladesh T-shirt suppliers for Primark, and they all had their arms folded, and they were talking Bangla, going, we're not doing this, no, not doing it. And one of my team spoke Bangla, and then we now have people coming to us wanting to be part of it. So it's about how that the way the supply chain works, they know who they buy for, because if there's a quality problem, they go right back and they find them, don't they? So it is there, they just don't want to tell you. So it's about how you unlock it and you find that one person. And then, so your second question was about...
Don't take no for an answer.
Don't take no for
No,
an answer.
every no is a soft no until you get hit.
Yeah.
Right. Right, exactly. She was asking about cost.
The cost
Oh,
of
yeah.
it.
So this is about, and we're at time, but, we're in perhaps coming up for difficult economic times. It's about risk in business, and risk in business always drives investment. So we know that on a board agenda, they all have a risk register, and one of the risks is about security of supply. So we've heard about today the security of food supply. But if you begin to link that, we've got climatic challenges in cotton, we are going to have a bumper crop in India this year. Sometimes last year it was down. So that, begins to drive investment at a board level. And then if you combine that with the personal piece, so I've had the C-suite out to our projects in India, and you can imagine the magic when the CEO meets a woman cotton farmer who's part of the program they're funding. And that combined with a business case is really, really powerful.
Yeah, we're back to stories again, aren't we? Yeah. So, Rob, I know you're chomping, but we need to close out here. Please help me in giving a hand to these three brilliant, amazing women transforming our supply chain.